A mountain man arrived with a dying baby, but found a young woman crying for her lost son. The wind carried no sound that morning, only the crunch of snow under old boots, the creak of worn leather, and the rasp of shallow breathing from the bundle pressed tight to the mountain man's chest. He walked like a shadow, tall, heavy-shouldered, every step deliberate down the narrow ridge that overlooked a dying forest. His coat was patched, his beard wild, and his eyes locked not on the horizon, but on the infant swaddled in a thick, blood-specked blanket. The child wasn't crying anymore. That was the part that scared him. Below the slope, a cabin stood crooked, built from weather-beaten pine, chimney-leaning, smoke-faint. A ribbon of creek shimmered beside it, almost frozen, but not yet dead. The man paused, boots half buried in slush, as if listening for something. There was nothing, no dogs, no laughter, no welcome, just cold and stillness. He made his way down. Closer now, he saw the porch sagged. Curtains didn't move. A boot print in the mud was already iced over. Still, he knocked, once, twice. The door creaked open by itself. Inside was warmth, and silence so thick it pressed on his ears. Firewood crackled low in the hearth. Her coat hung by the door, damp from old rain. Then he saw her. She was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, palms over her ears. A young woman, no older than 20, hair tangled like riverweed, dress torn at the hem. Her eyes were wide open, staring at nothing, but wet from crying that had long since stopped. On the table behind her sat a child's cup. Still full, cold, untouched, the man didn't speak. He just stood in the doorway, the dying baby cradled in his arms, and looked at the woman as if he'd walked into a ghost's memory. Her lips moved first, just a whisper. "He's gone." She said it like she wasn't sure if it was past or future. The woman hadn't moved. Not when he stepped inside, not when he shut the door behind him. The baby whimpered once, a sharp, rattling breath, and still she didn't flinch. The mountain man placed the child on the worn couch, kneeling beside it with quiet urgency. His hands, rough from years of splitting wood and burying friends, trembled as he unwrapped the layers. Fever, skin like paper, breath fading. He'd seen enough death to recognize the nearness of this one. Across the room, she whispered again. He was 3. Her voice broke like glass under snow. Went to get water. Just a minute. And he was gone. He didn't answer. He couldn't. There was nothing to say to a grief like that. He turned back to the baby, pulled a rag from his coat, dabbed water on the lips, pressed a hand to the tiny chest. Still breathing, barely, but breathing. Maybe the cabin had heat. Maybe she had something, anything. He looked up. She was watching now. Still curled in grief, but eyes fixed on the child. Her face didn't change, only her fingers curled into her palms, slow and tight, as if memory were clawing through her. The man stood, walked to the kitchen, found a kettle, filled it, lit the stove without asking. When he turned back, her lips were trembling. "I didn't hear him scream," she said, eyes not blinking. Maybe he didn't. That sentence pulled something in him loose. He hadn't heard a scream either. Years ago, when the barn caught fire, when the woman he'd tried to love had vanished in ash and smoke. They said the wind carried the sound away. He'd always wondered if maybe there was no scream to begin with. He looked at her now, this stranger with stormwater eyes, and saw the same silence he'd carried for years, the same guilt, the same crushing, endless question. If I had turned 1 second sooner, would they still be here? He could leave. The baby was fading. The woman was broken. There was nothing here but shadows and rot, but his feet didn't move. He pulled a blanket from the chair, laid it gently across her shoulders. She flinched at first, then didn't. "I'm not him," he said quietly. "But I know what it's like to lose someone you couldn't protect." She didn't reply. But her hands, once locked, loosened just a little. He walked back to the baby, stayed. That was the moment. The decision. Do not walk away from someone else's grief, no matter how late he was to arrive. The kettle hissed, and outside the wind picked up, low and mean, the kind that warned of something coming. He poured the water into a chipped mug, crushed a few herbs from the pouch in his coat and stirred. The woman hadn't moved, but her eyes followed him now. watched as he dipped a cloth in the warmth and placed it gently on the infant's chest. "He's not yours," she said, voice hoarse. It wasn't a question. He shook his head. "Found him at the edge of the ridge. Someone left him near my trapline, wrapped in this." He pulled the edge of the blanket to reveal a mark, a small stitched emblem, the kind only one group in the Northern Valley used. A deer skull inside a ring of flame. Her breath caught. Then she looked away. "You know it," he said softly. Her silence was the answer. He sat across from her, elbows on knees. "Tell me. They're not men." "Not really. Just knives and coats." Her voice cracked like dry wood. "They take what they want. Trade people like animals. My boy, I think they wanted him for something. And when he fought, they—" She stopped. "Swallowed hard. They left me behind. Said I wasn't worth taking." The mountain man's jaw clenched. Years ago, those same men had come for his brother's land. When the title didn't fold, the barn did, with his brother still inside. No charges. No arrests. Just burned wood and a silence no sheriff wanted to break. "You think they'll come back?" he asked. She nodded. "They don't leave loose ends." The baby whimpered again, louder this time. The herbs were working barely. The man rose, checked the window. Tracks already forming in the frost. Not his. Not hers. Fresh deep. "They're already close," he muttered. She stood too, shaky but alert now, as if survival had punched its way back into her. "Why bring him here?" she asked. He looked down at the child, then at her. "Didn't know where else to go. Maybe I was hoping someone here still knew how to hold a baby right." Thunder rolled far off. But it wasn't from the sky, a truck engine grinding over ice. They both heard it. There was no time now, no law that would help. Only choice, and somewhere between the crying infant, the woman with broken hope, and the tracks closing in, the mountain man knew. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about what kind of man he refused to become again. She didn't ask if they'd run. She just began moving, gathering what was left of her courage in the form of dried meat, a rusted rifle, and a half-full canteen. The mountain man checked the baby first. Eyes open now, breath steadier, weak but fighting. In the quiet they worked. No instructions, no plan spoken, just instinct. He found her father's old rifle propped behind a cupboard, dust-covered but usable. He pulled the bolt back, checked the chamber, empty. She stood behind him, holding out 3 bullets in a trembling palm. "You know how to shoot?" he asked. She shook her head. He didn't speak. Just walked to the door, opened it, and fired into the snowbank. The echo rolled into the hills like a warning. Then he handed the rifle to her. She stared at it like it was a memory, or maybe a burden passed down too young. He guided her fingers, showed her how to hold it steady, how to breathe through her shoulders, how not to flinch when it kicked. She missed the first 2 shots. The third cracked a piece of bark clean off a fence post. She didn't smile, but she didn't cry either. Inside, they fed the baby together. He held the tiny head steady while she warmed goat's milk over a fire she built herself. Her hands didn't shake as much now. Later, they sat by the window, no words. Just the hiss of the kettle, the crackle of fire, and a kind of stillness neither had felt in years. She broke it first. "My husband was one of them," she said, voice low. "Not by blood, but by choice." He let them in, gave them names, then said, "I had no right to stop them." The mountain man didn't respond, just reached for the firewood, added a piece, let the flame rise. After a long while, he said, "I let my brother die. Took the wrong road home. 5 minutes late." He screamed, and I wasn't there. She didn't gasp, didn't pity, just sat beside him, eyes locked on the fire. 2 broken timelines, different scars, same silence. When she tucked the baby into a small wool-lined basket near the fire, her hand lingered on its cheek. He noticed, and for the first time, she didn't pull away when his hand brushed hers. Outside, the wind had stilled. Inside, something softened, not healed, but no longer raw. In that moment, a rifle between them, a child wrapped in warmth, and no promises spoken. They became something neither of them could name, not quite safe, not quite strangers. But no longer alone, the baby was asleep. The fire low, but the knock on the door wasn't gentle. 3 slow, deliberate thuds. Then silence. The woman froze. The mountain man stood. One glance between them said everything. She grabbed the rifle, her fingers remembering what he'd taught her. He walked to the door. Another knock, louder, then a voice. "Don't be stupid, Caleb. We know you're in there," his name. Spoken like a curse. He hadn't heard it in years, not since he'd left the valley behind with blood on his boots and guilt in his chest. Only one man would dare say it now. He opened the door. A tall figure stood on the porch. Long coat, black gloves. Gun holstered but loose. Two others behind him, younger, twitchy, armed. "Well, hell," the man smirked. "Didn't think you'd be the one picking up our scraps." Caleb didn't speak. The man glanced past him, saw the woman, saw the baby. Whistled. She kept it alive. "That's rich, and you—" Trying to play savior again. "You got a soft spot for things that ain't yours, don't you?" "You're not taking them," Caleb said, voice low, calm. The smirk faded. "That ain't your call." The rifles raised. The woman braced behind the doorway, shaking but ready. Caleb stood between them and the firelight. "No blood," the leader warned. "We just want the kid." "He's marked." "That birth cloth? It means he was sold. We paid." "He's ours." "You paid a ghost," Caleb said. "The man who sold him is dead. Then we take it as debt." For a moment the porch was silent. The kind of silence that chooses who dies. Then Caleb stepped forward, slowly. "Let her go," he said. "Take me instead," the woman gasped. The leader raised an eyebrow. "You offering yourself for a sick baby?" "No," Caleb said. "I'm offering myself for everything I walked away from. For the barn. For my brother. For all the things you burned when no one could stop you." A long pause. Then laughter. "Always the tragic hero, huh?" He pulled his coat aside, showed the revolver holstered at his hip. "Try me," but before they could move, a sound cracked behind them. The woman's rifle. Firing into the air. All heads turned. She stepped out. Eyes hard, rifle steady. "You want to leave with something?" she said coldly. "Leave with this. He's not marked. He's mine now. And I won't let another man decide who's worth saving." The moment shattered. The youngest thug flinched. The older one backed off. The leader cursed but didn't draw. Maybe it was the fire in her voice. Maybe it was Caleb's stare. Either way, they left, not fast. Not afraid, but they left. And Caleb collapsed to his knees, breath shaking, not from fear, but from finally standing for something. The tires cracked ice as they rolled away. Slow at first, then swallowed by the trees. No words were spoken as the sound faded. Just breath. Just shaking limbs and a fire that hissed like it too had been holding its breath. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, chest heaving. One hand still gripped the revolver, knuckles pale. She stood beside him, rifle lowered now, but not forgotten. Smoke drifted from the barrel like a ghost leaving the room. Inside, the baby stirred, soft, uncertain, as if waking into a world that had nearly abandoned him. Caleb turned. His voice was barely more than gravel. "You didn't have to do that," she didn't answer. Just walked past him into the cabin toward the child. She picked him up, arms instinctively gentle, and held him close to her chest. "I didn't think I could," she whispered, though mostly to herself. He watched her sway slightly as she held the child, a silent rhythm, like something ancient remembering how to live again. An hour passed like a sigh. They didn't eat. They didn't speak. Outside, the snow fell again, slow and clean, covering the fresh boot tracks, the frozen blood by the porch, the shattered shell near the fence. Before dawn, they buried something behind the cabin. Not a body, but the remnants of what had been, the child's torn birth cloth. A symbol of ownership turned to ash. Caleb poured the last of the fire's coals over it, then covered it with soil and stone. No marker. Just a promise. He didn't ask her what she'd do next. She didn't ask him to stay. But when he turned to leave, coat on, rifle slung, the path calling him back to the ridge, she stepped forward. "You still don't have a name," she said quietly. He paused. "Hand on the door, Caleb," she nodded once. "I'm Ruth." Their eyes held for a moment too long. Not longing, not love. Just understanding. Two broken maps, finally aligned, even if only for a night. As he stepped outside, the wind had gone. The world felt strangely new, but before he vanished into the trees, a small sound stopped him. The cabin door opened. Ruth stepped out, child in her arms, blanket wrapped around them both. "We'll stay if you stay," she said, not pleading. Just true. He looked at them. 2 lives that should have ended, but didn't. Not yet. Then he nodded, and for once, silence didn't mean goodbye. Spring came slow that year. Snow pulled back like a tired tide, revealing earth scarred by boots, bullets, and beginnings. The cabin remained, still crooked, still small, but something in the way smoke now curled from its chimney spoke of warmth that wasn't just borrowed. Caleb built a fence, not for protection, but for tomatoes. Ruth planted them with bare hands, dirt under nails, baby on her hip. He laughed once when she cursed a stubborn root. She smiled without apology. The child, now strong enough to cry, to grip, to laugh without fear, never asked where he came from. And they never told him, not yet, not with words, but in gestures, in how Caleb carried him on his shoulders through the valley, in how Ruth sang to him from the porch at dusk. The boy would know he was chosen, not abandoned. They kept no photographs, just memories carved into wood, a notch on the doorframe for every inch he grew. A mark near the hearth, where the rifle fell the night Ruth chose to stay. And in the back, a pile of stones over the burnt cloth, untended but never forgotten. Sometimes, when the air was too quiet, Caleb would sit alone by the stream, whittling pieces of cedar into tiny animals. His hands, once used only to survive, had learned to shape things that didn't need to bleed to mean something. Ruth wrote letters she never sent, folded them into a jar she buried beneath the window. One read, "He is not yours anymore, and I am not afraid of you." Time didn't heal them, but it gave them room to become something else. Not just survivors, but keepers of a life they'd rebuilt from silence and ash. And on certain nights, when the sky turned violet and the boy slept between them, Caleb would whisper words Ruth never asked him to say. "I came here with a dying baby, and found a reason to stay alive." Some stories don't begin with love. They begin with someone refusing to walk away.